I'd like to welcome all guests and visitors. We'd ask that you silence your phones. Janice Mitchell, you lead us in the song.
For a moment there, I thought we weren't going to have anyone, but boy, this looks nice, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to sing You're a Grand Old Flag. Remember, the pitch I give you is our beginning pitch, but it has nothing to do with anything else. So we just sing it. Do, do, do. Okay, so here we go. This is what we're going to do. Yeah, it has nothing to do with anything else. Okay, here we go. That's our beginning pitch. Ready? You're a grand old flag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Every heart beats true under red, white, and blue, where there's never a boast or brag. But should old acquaintance be forgot, big finish, keep your eye on the grand old flag. Yay!
Alan Wright, will you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I've got Sam Carey for our invocation.
Let's pray. Dear God, may we glorify you in our actions and also in our words. Make us humble so that we can magnify your name, and help us keep true to the high ideals of Rotary and our theme of service over self. Bless this food to nourish our body, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Dick Hinton, guests and visitors.
Good to see you, man.
The only visitor we have today is the visitor that I brought. I looked for the list and I thought, where is he? Okay, the visitor, stand up, Rick Ward. Rick is a friend of mine. We go to church together, so let's give him a hand. Glad to have you, Rick.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dick. Janice, anything to report on Mobile Mills?
Mobile Meals was delivered today by staff, but I would like to tell you that Buddy's Barbecue here at the Bearden Banquet Hall, they are going to be celebrating their 30th year of being in business. And they're going to have a fabulous event here with Henry Cho. If you know Henry Cho, he's a comedian. And then Brian Clay is going to be the musical entertainment. It's going to be July 14th from 6:30 till 10 p.m. Tickets are $125, and if you'd like to come, please buy a ticket. If you'd like to sponsor a table, you can do that too. And all the information is online, and I also have some information if you would like to attend that event. Buddies and Beer Banquet Hall are always so good to us. So if you'd like to attend this event, Henry Cho is hilarious, and Brian Clay is a fabulous musician. So you will have a good time. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. May 20th, and I don't see Kelly here, so I think everybody knows that's this Saturday, I believe. We're having our district training at Stone Memorial High School. Now, I'm a little worried. I'd heard the treasurer, they were going over on how to cook the books. So they were looking for someone that was good at that, and I think Paul's leading on the treasurer. And
I took all your notes, so I know how to do it.
Well, I learned everything I knew from Ted, so.
He's the leader.
Jim Cassianis, I think we had a social yesterday. Do we have many people attend?
They have his family there.
We had a great time yesterday on our social, and that's the things like that are the one part that I thought had been missing that would make this type of an organization truly complete. And so we need to keep doing that, doing more of it, because everybody had a blast. We sat out at the garden patio at Union Place, and it was wonderful. We had 9 members, 1 brought a spouse, and I brought 3 gifts. It was a very small group, but we had a great time, enjoyed some drinks and appetizers, and just enjoyed a wonderful afternoon. So next one that Jim plans, or whoever, more of y'all need to show up, because you're going to have a fun time and get to know each other a little better. So be there.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Dr. Jim. We did have a good time. Stream cleanup, I don't see Gary West, but that's June 3rd, and I think we're up to about 7, but we need at least 10, because some of us are old. And then Community Ward, I think I emailed that out. We are looking next, the 3rd quarter, to award one of the businesses around here that's involved in the community, that's an outstanding business, with award. We're going to do that each quarter going forward. And then last, Janice was talking about Henry Cho, and you know, he's funny, but he's not as funny as I am, of course. I was just remembering that I had this older gentleman that he was about to pass away, and he had he decided, even though people had said you can't take your money with it, he was going to take his with him. He was bound and determined. So he gave $1 million to his doctor, he gave $1 million to his priest, and $1 million to his lawyer, and told him to put it in his coffin that he was taking his money with him. By golly, he'd had successful, and he was going to take it with him. So anyway, after he passes away, unfortunately, and then they have their, you know, the funeral, and the priest, the doctor, and the lawyer get together afterwards, and the doctor, kind of feeling a little guilty, says, you know, he gave me $1 million to put in his coffin. I said, that's a waste. And I had some of my patients really could use some help. So I kept $300,000, and I actually only put $700,000 in there. But that $300,000 is going to be great. It's really going to help out some of the indigents and the people that really could use some help. And the priest kind of looked a little sad, or felt bad, because he kind of admitted that, you know, he's got a lot of things in community he could do with that money. So he took half of it and kept it, and he put $500,000 in there, and he said, but it'll go to the community. This is going to really help out. And the doctor the lawyer looked at both of them and said he was shocked. He couldn't believe that they took that money and they didn't put it in the coffin. He said, I wrote a check for the full $1 million, and I put that in the coffin, and I said, I did the right thing by him. Anyway, unless somebody else has got an announcement, I've got Patty to introduce our speaker.
You know, I'm particularly pleased to introduce our speaker today. Not only did I grow up in Oak Ridge, but Ray always delighted my father with his phone calls and personal interviews about the early days of the Manhattan Project. Ray Smith was named historian for the city of Oak Ridge in 2015. He was selected to serve as a commissioner of the Tennessee Historical Commission and has received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the East Tennessee Historical Society, as well as many other prestigious awards for his books, columns, and documentaries. Ray's contributions ensure that current and future generations can learn about the heritage, history, ongoing and planned activities in the city of Oak Ridge. His nearly 5 decades of experience at Y-12 has provided Ray with a deep understanding and high appreciation of Oak Ridge's unique history. Please help me welcome fellow Rotarian, Ray Smith.
First thing I have to do is take a picture of you guys so I can put you on Facebook, all right? Smile now. We're going to go all the way around the room. right, that's done. Got you down. I'm going to talk just a little bit about myself, just a very little bit. And I want to tell you two things. One, I married my high school sweetheart right out of high school, Fanny. And I had 57 wonderful years with her. And then February a year ago, in 2022, she tested positive for COVID. We protected her for 2 years. She had sarcoidosis. If any of you know what that is, a lung disease. And we knew that if she got COVID, it'd likely be fatal, and it was. But before she passed, we traveled a lot after retirement. We'd been to Europe a number of times. Notice I'm a Vietnam vet, 68 and 69. One of our trips in Europe, we got to go to Normandy, to the American Cemetery at Omaha Beach. And there's a big statue there of a man coming up out of the water. And when we got there, the people in charge wanted somebody to lay a wreath at that monument. So I volunteered. They wanted a veteran, so I volunteered. 2 others did too. We laid that wreath, and then they said, okay, any other veterans in the audience, come up and let us recognize you too. About 20 other people came up, and they said, thank you for your service, all the standard stuff. When they got through, the man standing right beside me looked at me and said, welcome home. Now that's a dead giveaway, he's a Vietnam vet. But we didn't get welcomed home. We didn't wear our uniforms when we came home. So I said to him, when were you in country? He said 1968 and 69. When he said that, time stood still for me, but 2 other people standing right beside him, 2 other men, said at the same time, I was there in 68 and 69. Now there was 4 of us standing there just side by side. We didn't have to talk. We knew what we'd been through. Fanny was over to the side taking pictures, and she didn't realize what was going on. But when we got back to the ship that night, she had a picture of the 4 of us standing there. Highlight of all of my European travels. One more really quick story. The last trip Fanny and I took was to Vail, Colorado. I do all kinds of tours of Oak Ridge. 65 passenger buses, families, individuals, whatever they want. I had one to call me and say they want you to meet them at the parking lot of the American Museum of Science and Energy. And they only have 3 hours. They've got to be back at the airport to leave, so be on time. Well, I was there. They come driving up in a Mercedes van with a chauffeur who was wearing a tuxedo. Now I said, oh my, this is going to be a different tour. First thing they wanted to do was to go to Calhoun's. They had rented the entire event center for 1 table of cold sandwiches. So I said, my, what am I into here? Anyway, I gave them the tour. When we got through, the man, like they normally do, they'll just shake my hand when they're getting out or something at the end of the tour. When he shook my hand, he stuck a wad of bills in it. I just put them in my pocket. When I got in the truck, I pulled it out and see how much he'd give me. He'd give me $500. I said, well, that was a pretty good tour. That's a good tip. It's the last I'll hear of that. Well, that was in August of 2019. In December, I got a call from the same lady that set that up and said, this man wants you to come to Vail, Colorado the last week in February and to make a presentation about Oak Ridge. So I thought, I wonder what this is. He said, now, it's all expense paid, you just have to get there. So I looked him up on the internet. He was in finance. He had got in trouble with the stock agencies. He had lost his company, and he had to pay a fine. I don't know what all had gone on, but in the article it said he was still worth $800 million. So I said, well, I think he can afford it. I'm going. So we went out there, and I want you to know what this man does is he goes around the country finding things that's of interest to him, and each year, the last week in February, he brings 20 people to his house in Vail, Colorado, sets up a round table in his garage with a heated tent. And those people that were there there was a SEAL team, Navy SEAL team member that had gotten shot in the back, and he was in a wheelchair. The commander for SEAL Team 6, he'd retired, but he was there, and the man that shot Osama bin Laden wanted him to come back when they were interviewing him. The man that's found the largest dinosaur in the world was there. A magician from Las Vegas that stole the watch off of my arm without me even knowing. But he also stole the itinerary and the keys for President Carter's entourage several years ago. He and his wife were there. And then there was a Navy Blue Angel pilot that was there. He was retired. But he gave me this bracelet. I never wore a bracelet in my life. This thing says, "Glad to be here." When those Blue Angel pilots get through with their shows, they come into the hangar and they look at one another and say, "I'm just so glad to be here." So I wear that bracelet. Then there was a little 16-year-old girl from Russia that had been deformed. Her legs were deformed from birth. And she had them at age 14, she had her legs cut off at the knees. And she's now a challenged athlete going all over the world, doing things without complete legs. But she's a hockey player, and I don't know what all. She's great. And Ray and Fanny Smith. Don't you see that? I mean, it was amazing. I had Fanny talk about her experience at Oak Ridge Associated University. She actually was the person that wrote up all of the radiation exposures in the world that happened during her 35 years there. She wasn't a scientist, she was administrative, but she knew enough to talk to these people that just barely could say Oak Ridge. Anyway, that's enough about me. Let's get on to this. Now, I want to talk about Robert Oppenheimer. That picture you see there was made at the guest house, which is now the Alexander Guest House, a senior living center. But during the Manhattan Project and for some time after it, it was the guest house. This picture was made in 1946. You know, there's a movie coming out July the 21st about Oppenheimer. And there's a documentary being made by NBC that's going to come out in June. They contacted me and wanted me to help them write the documentary about Oppenheimer. And I said, Oppenheimer wasn't in Oak Ridge, he was in Los Alamos. But his brother was here. Frank Oppenheimer worked at Y-12, lived in Oak Ridge, and Robert likely visited, but actually the story about Robert Oppenheimer is going to be about Los Alamos. Now that's where I've got the picture. It was made at that fireplace in the guest house. So I framed it and set it on that same mantel that you see up in the corner of that picture there. So it's sitting at the same place. Now, we've got this set up, and I had just a little trouble with the audio, but I would not be defeated. Now, I know I'm going to step off from your camera, but it'll be all right. I'm going over here. We're going to watch this introduction to this documentary, and I want you to hear it.
This is a national emergency. Detonators charged. We're in a race against the Nazis. And I know what it means. If the Nazis have a bomb.
They have a 12-month head start. 18. How could you possibly know that?
We've got one hope. All America's industrial might and scientific innovation connected here. A secret laboratory. Keep everyone there until it's done.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
Build a town town, build it fast. We don't let scientists bring their families, we'll never get the best.
Why would we go to the middle of nowhere for who knows how long?
Why? Why? How about because this is the most important thing that ever happened in the history of the world?
You're the great improviser, but this you can't do in your head.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world? Chances are near zero. Near zero. What do you want with theory alone? Zero would be nice. This is a matter of life and death. I can perform this miracle. World War II would be over. Our boys would come home.
That's happening, isn't it?
The world will remember this day. Our work here will ensure a peace mankind has never seen. Until somebody builds a bigger bomb.
You are the men who gave them the power to destroy themselves. And the world is not prepared.
Tremendous to know what's next. What's next?
That was all in Los
So I highly recommend that you watch both of them, the documentary film that'll be on NBC, probably be streamed on their streaming channel, Peacock. And then the movie will come out on the 21st. If you want to pay a little extra, we're going to show it one day early in Oak Ridge. I don't know if anybody wants to come or not, but we're going to do it. And obviously, this will be a big deal at Los Alamos. It will be a lot about Los Alamos. I'll be amazed if Oak Ridge gets more than just a mere mention. Now, unfortunately, that's not accurate. 60 cents of every dollar spent during the Manhattan Project was spent in Oak Ridge. It was by far the largest operation. Everything but Los Alamos was managed out of Oak Ridge by Colonel Nichols. So we are always in contention with Los Alamos for notoriety. They're better at it than we are. Here's a book that if you've not seen, I highly recommend to you. It's The Girls of Atomic City by Denise Kiernan. And she's writing about a dozen of the women who were Calutron girls during the Manhattan Project. Now, they didn't call them Calutron girls, they called them cubicle operators. And I had the opportunity to work with Denise when she was doing that documentary, or writing that book. And she called me, said, "Ray, I want to write a book about the women of Atomic and of Oak Ridge." And I said, "Okay, I'll help you with that. I'll introduce you to them." I introduced her to one woman, Colleen Black. Colleen introduced her to all the rest of the women. I didn't have anything else to do. But that's a good book. She included some of the science in there as well as the story of the women. Now, this is the way Oak Ridge is laid out. You can see the city of Oak Ridge is up to the top, and then across Pine Ridge is Y-12, then across Chestnut Ridge and out to the west about 5 miles is the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and then back up into the East Fork Valley about 9 or 10 miles to the west of Oak Ridge, the city, is where the K-25 gaseous diffusion plant was, and where S-50, the thermal diffusion plant, was. Now, when I was here before, we went into great detail about the Y-12 plant, and we talked a lot about the city. I've got a little bit more about the city to share with you today, but I want you to see, I also mentioned that there was a spy that gave the plans to Fat Man to Russia before we ever used it. Well, since I talked to you, there's been a book come out about George Koval. It's called The Sleeper Agent, written by Ann Hagedorn. And again, she came to Oak Ridge, and I helped her with some of the information she included in there. Notice the picture over to the right. That's Putin when he gave the highest civilian award to George Koval after he died. They didn't recognize very much Koval during his lifetime, but they did after he passed away. But he was in Oak Ridge, and I'm convinced that the combination of Klaus Fuchs giving the plans to Fat Man and George Koval telling Stalin how much trouble it was to separate uranium. Remember, it took a long while, over a year, just to get enough for one little bomb. And it took a lot of people to do that. And that's why they went with plutonium and went for the Fat Man bomb. I mean, they already had drawings, they had plans for it, so they didn't try to create a uranium bomb.
Koval's American?
Koval was born in Iowa, actually, and he went to Russia. His parents were from Russia. They went back to Russia. He went to school over there and then got recruited for spying and came back to the United States and did the spying. But he was a U.S. citizen, okay, and he was able to do that because he was born in Iowa. And then he left right after the Manhattan Project and went back to Russia, stayed in Russia the rest of his life. That's K-25. It's a half a mile down each of those wings, so that building was a mile long. And the process just ran back and forth across the building, and it went around that U. Been about 3,000 stages of gaseous diffusion, and it was a continuous operation. You could operate for about a tenth what it cost to run Y-12. And that's where all of the highly enriched uranium we have today came from, is out of the K-25 gaseous diffusion process. The way that works is you pump uranium hexafluoride through a barrier as a gas, pump it through the barrier. The barrier in the space the size of my thumbnail has a billion holes. That's a B. And they're all equally spaced, all the same size. That 235, being 3 neutrons lighter than the 238, will go through those little holes a little easier, a little faster than the 238. So if you do that 3,000 times, you're going to begin to accumulate a higher percentage of uranium-235. That's exactly how K-25 worked. Now this is S-50, the thermal diffusion plant. It was built at the K-25 site. Oppenheimer is the one that recommended it. He learned the Navy was using thermal diffusion. And he told Groves, he said, if you'll get them to build that, buy that steam plant, which we can't use yet because it was to provide electricity to the K-25 gaseous diffusion process, but they didn't have the barrier material working yet. So he said, let's build that thermal diffusion plant and use that steam. So Groves went to the contractor and he said, I need a thermal diffusion plant built right by this steam plant, and I need it in 90 days. Contractor said, that's impossible, it can't be done. Groves looked him in the eye and said, you've got 80 days. They built it in 76 days, operated it for 3 months, and it's calculated that it shortened the war by 3 weeks by being able to get that little bit of separation up front. This is the castle on the hill, the administration building, first building built at Oak Ridge. Started in November of 1942. And then beyond that, you can see Jackson Square, the chapel on the hill, the guest house, and those, that that's the Chapel on the Hill is now a parking lot, but the federal office building is built right beside it. And that was Happy Valley. It was a construction site built out at the K-25 site. 15,000 people lived out there while they were constructing the K-25 site. And then after they got it constructed, they actually demolished this site. It's all wooded area now. But when the History Channel came to Oak Ridge in 2006, and they wanted to do a film about Oak Ridge, and they wanted to call it The Lost City of the A-Bomb. And they wanted me to find a lost city for them. And I said, all right, we'll go to Happy Valley. And we did. I took the mayor out there and let him find an old fire hydrant that was still out in the woods. That was our lost city of the A-Bomb. You can still see that on the History Channel. It's on there now for you to look at if you're on your computer. That's a street in Oak Ridge. Yeah, it was muddy. That's actually West Founts Road off of Florida Avenue, and every one of those houses are still there today. Most of the east end of Oak Ridge is still original houses from the Manhattan Project. I'd say good 90% of the houses in that section. Now most of them got either aluminum siding or brick veneer on them now, but they still, if you know the alphabet houses, the A's, the B's, the C's, you know how they were formed or how they were shaped. You can still recognize those alphabet houses all in the east end of Oak Ridge. Now that's up on top of the ridge, right at the top of Hillside, and it's on West Outer Drive. That's the Children's Museum now that you see up in the upper left. That was the Highland View Elementary School during the Manhattan Project. But it's a really great children's museum now, and it's also the home to the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. Their visitor center is located up there. The flat top that we had at the American Museum of Science and Energy, when we had to move out of that location into a smaller space over on Main Street, we didn't have anywhere to put that flat top, so we gave it to the Children's Museum and got it moved up there, and it's set up behind the Children's Museum now. Those houses that are in that, right along that street, those are all flat tops. They're still there today. There are a lot of trees around them now, and they all have pitched roofs. Flat roofs leak, so they put pitched roofs on them. Now, during the Manhattan Project, they brought anything they could get in here to provide housing for people, including trailers. There were 75,000 people living in the city of Oak Ridge in August of 1945, fifth largest city in the state, and it wasn't on any map. They had the 9th largest bus system in the nation, 850 buses. Lester Fox, who was the patriarch of the Fox automobile dealerships in Oak Ridge, up until he passed away just within the last 6 months. But in 1942 and 43, he was in school in Oliver Springs. Now, that's just a little north of Oak Ridge. But his older brother and him saw an opportunity, so they bought 100 buses, and they started the Fox Bus Company. Now, Lester said those buses broke down every day. One day he was in Clinton, just about 10 miles east of Oak Ridge, and he had one of those buses on the wrecker behind him. He was pulling that bus. He saw another bus over on the side of the road that was broke down. He pulled over in front of that bus and tied it on to the one he had on the wrecker with a log chain. Put him a driver in that second bus and pulled out on the road. Policeman stopped him and said, "Lester, you can't do that. Leave one of those buses and come back and get it. And besides, I want you to meet me in the courthouse at 8:30 on Monday morning." Well, Lester worried all weekend about what was going to happen to him, but he went. When he got there, the policeman was already there. He said, "Okay, Lester, come on." He took him down to the clerk's office and said, "Give this boy a driver's license." Lester was 14 years old when he got a driver's license. That's Jackson Square, and right down at the bottom, that U shape, that Jackson Square is still there today. All of those buildings are still there. One of them is now Dean's Restaurant. One of them is the Oak Ridge Playhouse. It used to be the Center Theater. And then the soup kitchen is down in the lower corner there. And up in, that's what it looks like today, looking from a different direction. And they put a water fountain in the middle of the parking lot. But all of those other buildings are still there. That's what the guest house looked like in 1945, 46, when Oppenheimer would have stayed there. That's what it looks like today. It's a restored, the Department of Energy put $500,000 into it to preserve it. And I gotta run. That clock is to tell me I gotta quit before you all have to leave. I want you to know that Big Ed's Pizza is in one of the old original buildings too. And in the American Museum of Science and Energy, that's where it's moved to over on Main Street. The K-25 History Center opened in February of 2020, closed in March, stayed closed for a year and a half. It's open now again, and it's our latest museum and one of the best you'll ever see to tell the story of the Manhattan Project at K-25. I mentioned the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. They're located at the Children's Museum in the main lobby. There's now Oak Ridge History Museum. When we moved the American Museum of Science and Energy, we had to go in a smaller space. Didn't have space for a lot of the city history. So the local historical society has taken those exhibits and put it in one of the original recreation buildings, the Midtown Community Center. And it's now at the Oak Ridge History Museum at 102 Robertsville Road. The Y-12 History Center has been redone since I retired. They've done a good job, though. I won't complain. And they've got a little boy, model of little boy there. That's what Y-12 looks like today with the New Hope Center down in the lower left. And the other buildings up there, the little U-shaped building, well, little, it's a big U-shaped building you see is the Jack Case Center. And then the next white building on above that one is the highly enriched uranium materials facility, where all of the nation's highly enriched uranium that's not in a nuclear weapon, a research reactor, or the Navy's reactors on their ships and submarines. It's all stored there. That's the $6.5 billion construction project to build the uranium processing facility. It's actually completed now, the buildings are, and they'll be moving in the next year or so. I don't want to waste time on that. That's the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and has the fastest, world's most powerful supercomputer. That's the high flux isotope reactor. It's a part of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And the Spallation neutron source, they're about to build a second target facility for the Spallation neutron source. And I mentioned the world's most powerful supercomputer, Frontier. This is the K-25 site, which is now the East Tennessee Technology Park. And they're going to build Kairos Power is building a small modular nuclear reactor there on the old K-33 site. TVA, I don't want to do that one either. TVA is building 3 reactors on the old Clinch River breeder reactor site. These are places where we've brought nuclear material, Y-12, from around the world. If it's in danger of falling into terrorist hands, we bring it here. Now, that's enough. If I go on much longer, we'll be running over time.
Yeah, listen, cut it off, but let's give, say, 5 minutes to answer
Any questions?
What happened to the Clinch River breeder reactor?
Carter killed it. In the 1970s, he did. He shut it off.
Was
But
it,
now they're
was
going
it
to use it.
finished? And what?
No, it was just a hole in the ground. Yes, sir.
So thorium reactor design for the Air
Yeah.
Force. You know, this guy Kirk Sorensen
Yeah.
is working for NASA trying to find a better solution for nuclear energy. Any news about thorium reactor development? at all?
Yeah, you know, Alvin Weinberg got fired because he was taking money that was intended for the light water reactors, and he was using it on molten salt reactors. And he got caught. They fired him. Now, you know what the world's going to? Molten salt reactor. He was right all along, but he didn't have the political backing for it. The thorium source is going to be the way it'll go, and it'll be the molten salt. Now, the good thing about that is it fails in a safe mode. There's no way you can have any problem resulting from a molten salt reactor in the way of radiation or any kind of catastrophic failure. It's designed where that just can't happen.
Is there any development on molten salt out there right
Yes.
currently? Okay.
Yes, there is. There's experimentation going on at Oak Ridge National
Is
Laboratory.
DOE funding that? Is there any write-ups about it to speak of?
Yeah, I'd Google it. It's likely out there, but I haven't seen it lately.
Okay. Thank
But
you.
it's really, there's more research being done and more actual work being done on building molten salt reactors in China.
Oh, I know.
Okay, and all over Europe, there's people looking at it. It's going to be the wave of the future. Yes, sir.
Weinberg to Oak Ridge the same as Oppenheimer was to Los Alamos?
Well, no, Oppenheimer was more significant in the Manhattan Project. If it hadn't been for Oppenheimer, we would have never got the design. He knew what to do, and he knew how to do it. Now, Weinberg was up at CP1 in Chicago when they built that reactor, the first reactor ever built. He was not included in the primary group, so he didn't get in the picture, but he was up there. Then he came to Oak Ridge, and he was the one that designed and built, along with Fermi, who built the graphite reactor that's in Oak Ridge. And then, of course, Weinberg went on to be the Oak Ridge National Laboratory director for 15 years. So he was the most significant scientist in Oak Ridge. But I wouldn't put him as high as Oppenheimer.
How do you correlate what Oak Ridge did and what Los Alamos did?
Okay, Los Alamos designed and built. They made the bomb materials. But all of it came from, uranium came from Oak Ridge. The plutonium came from Hanford, Washington. They just put it together. Now, the scientific minds that designed it were in Los Alamos. The machinery that actually made it was in Oak Ridge, and the reactors were in Hanford, Washington. And again, 60 cents of every dollar spent in Oak Ridge. Anything else? All right. I had a wonderful time with you today. Thank you much. I'm supposed to stay up here.
What was that?
She said I couldn't leave.
Well,
very good.
we give a book to Pond Gap School every year, or every week, and this book is Dork Diaries. I don't know why they put that.
Dork Diaries. I wrote that book.
They wrote
It's an autobiography.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, Jim, I'll share something with the group. I read a book about Richard Feynman. He was a scientist that was in Los Alamos.
He's my favorite.
Oh my God.
You know that he actually would go around and crack the safe?
That's what I was
People
gonna say.
do you know that he
They
found...
were sitting around, they had nothing to do for about, 90 days
Right,
before
yeah.
everybody got there, and Feynman breaking into all the
He could,
DOE offices.
yeah,
and
he could
stealing
pick the locks, but he also found a hole in the fence. He walked through that hole and come around and would walk in the gate. He'd go through that hole and come around and walk in the gate to see how long it took that guard to recognize the same man coming. Now, one more thing about Feynman. Feynman came to Oak Ridge at the very early part of the Manhattan Project. The reason he came is because Tennessee Eastman, the Kodak company, all right, was managing Y-12. They were stacking uranium on one side of a concrete block wall, and then putting more uranium on the other side. And Feynman said, you don't know, but those neutrons don't care. They go right between, you know, that concrete wall. So he came out here and he told them, he said, don't you store that stuff so close together. You have to keep it separated. So Feynman was a good one, and he was funny.
That book is great if anybody wants to read it. Richard Feynman, I'll look it up this year.
Anyway, that was great. We really appreciate it. The 2 or 3 things. One, you mentioned the cemetery in Normandy, and we did that when I went. My wife speaks French, unfortunately. So we went to France and we went to Normandy. That cemetery, as I understand it, is United States property. It's only United States property, probably in Europe, but it's in France. It's owned by the United States. It's a cemetery that was set up for veterans of the World War II. Rick Ward, great to have you.
Thank you.
Stream cleanup, June 3rd, we need bodies.
Don't stay in the creek.
Not the creek.
We don't want to find any though. Right?
No, we need help.
That's what it sounded. See if we can
I
find.
forgot one thing, just a second. I've laid some of these cards on your table. On the back side of the card is links to the documentary films that I've produced. There's about 12 of them out there. Pick up one of those cards, make a picture of it or something, and go look at those documentary films.
And next week, we're going to have Step Down, but we're going to have Bob Kessling for our speaker next week. Do we have any other announcements? Ted, can you do the four-way test?
The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First,
Is it true?
second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
third,
Will it build goodwill and better
and
friendships?
fourth.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?